Hey friends, this is Frank Rieta with the Atlanta Ruby Users Group. This video is a recording of our January presentation from Gabe Torres on his development of the Minesweeper Alliance game in Ruby on Rails. Unfortunately, there was some audio-visual difficulties and the first portion of his presentation was lost. However, he graciously re-recorded that portion at the end and I flipped them around and combined them back together. But at the 5-minute mark, there's just a moment of incongruity. However, please join me in supporting our friend Gabe on one of his first public presentations, and he is a new developer and a new member of our community. We're very grateful to have had him. Enjoy. Minesweeper Alliance in Ruby on Rails.
So my name's Gabe, and this is Minesweeper Alliance, which is an interactive experience with Rails. And I made this application with my mentor, Paul. And So what is Minesweeper Alliance? It's a modern reimage of the classic logic puzzle game with features like multiplayer or real-time interactivity, stats, and of course, it's made with Ruby on Rails versus C, which it was created with in 1989. And so the focus of this presentation is going to be the process of making models that are essential to Minesweeper, like cell, board, game. And between board and game, we're going to do a live demo. And we're going to touch on user stats and the multiplayer or the real-time updates. We're also going to talk about the architecture of Minesweeper Alliance, which mainly consists of object-oriented design and single responsibility principles. And we'll get into these topics throughout the presentation. So a quick overview of the app itself. There's a war room or the homepage. There's also, it should be noted that if there's a game started, then the war room or homepage updates and you'll be redirected to that game since there's only one game going on at a time. So whatever is happening on the homepage is the most single truth there is in the game because there's only one game going on. Then we have a sweep ops archive, which is our history of past games. And we have our metrics, which is an arcade-style leaderboard of sorts that it ranks the games played, and you could click into the game and see how that game went. You could see how it ended. You could see the players who attended it, if they made a move, and if they were a part of the game, that is. And there is a player page as well, and this is a detailed view of the player history and stats. So what is Minesweeper? Well, Minesweeper is a classic logic puzzle game that features a grid of squares, and the squares will either be blanked, numbered, or mined. And some of the features that make up the classic game are having cells that have roles like hidden, revealed, flag, mined, or a neighboring mined. And that's kind of what you can see on the little GIF in the bottom right. You see the revealed, you see blank spaces, flags, and mines. And when we created our app, Minesweeper Alliance, we try to keep true to the classic game as much as possible. So some background on the beginnings of the game. There was questions like, have you ever seen an app and wanted to know how it was done, or wondered how it could be approved and wanted to create it using Ruby on Rails? That's kind of how we got started with our application, Minesweeper Alliance. Paul has stumbled across an engineer named Radon Skorik, who built his own Minesweeper application, Mines versus Humanity, using Ruby on Rails. And we were immediately impressed by it, and we had a big interest in the live updating multiplayer feature, Phil. We had a big interest in the board and just the overall implementation of Rails in general. We thought it'd be a lot of fun to remake and learn from. So that's what we did. And today I'm just going to talk about the process of building the classic Minesweeper game with Ruby on Rails, and mainly because I want people to know how fun Ruby on Rails can be and how it can be used to create creative applications as well. Presents a has many relationship, and the single dash through line that's above board represents a has one. So you can tell that board has many cells, game has many cells through board, board has one game, or cell has one game through board. Um, it's a good way to understand how the models talk to each other and how they work. So to understand our ERD a little better, we have to understand what active versus passive programming is. And there's a metaphor. It goes, does the rocket strike the object, or does the object get struck by the rocket? And that's passive programming, is when I believe it's the object getting struck by the rocket. And we use passive programming to reflect our clear intent when making our EID and making our application with that in mind. For example, when a player clicks a cell, the cell handle is being revealed instead of the board controlling every state of the cell, or every cell state. And this makes the code more modular and the responsibilities more clear. Because every model has specific responsibilities. The board places mines, and the cell determines if it can be safely revealed or not. And the game oversees the overall state, such as victory or defeat. So let's talk about our cell objects. Cells represent a clickable space, and its value is revealed when a player clicks on the cell. We wanted to get a quick idea on how the cell would be working. So we quickly made an inspect method here, and we built this inspect string out of two methods, and we combined a couple inspect methods with the inspect string. But what are cells? Well, cells represent a position on the board that is clickable. This is the same image. Just get another overview of it. So what are they doing? And what do they do? And what they do is decided after the first click in the game. But they exist in the following states. They could be unrevealed, which is a default state. They could be revealed, and that's a played cell. Or they could be flagged, and that's a user action that displays a mark for a potential mine. They could be mined, which is a cell that is secretly mined. So they can contain a mine, they may be blank, or they may be a neighboring cell that will indicate a nearby mine. So what does cell look like right now? Well, cell underwent some optimization, and it has a few service objects to keep the SRP going strong. So a little background on service objects. They are dedicated classes designed to encapsulate a specific business logic. And this allows for clean code to help separate complex operations into a single place. And the service objects contain composed methods, so it adheres to SRP. And some info on SRP. It is single responsibility principle. And it basically means every object should only do one specific thing. And this makes the code easier to understand, change, and maintain. And composed methods is also a design principle. And they're written to perform a single defined clear task. And they're often made of smaller methods as well. So our service objects. We have cell reveal, which is a service object for collaborating with game, board, and cell to process a cell reveal event. And we have that right here. So this is our call method. It's one of the composed methods I had mentioned earlier. And basically it's checking if a cell is already revealed, and if it is, it'll return itself to avoid processing. Or it's going to go through it, and it's going to see if it's going to check it and ensure that a game hasn't already started, it's going to check to see if a cell has been revealed. It's going to end the game if a cell has been, if a cell does have a mine, and it's automatically going to reveal neighboring cells if the current cell is blank. It's going to check if players have won by revealing all safe cells as well, and then it's going to return self. So our next service object is cell reveal neighbors. It's a service object that helps process the reveal neighbors event. It reveals all non-flagged neighboring cells, all flagged or all non-flagged neighbors to a given cell, and saves the player time. The operation will process if the cell is revealed and the number of flagged neighbors matches the cell's value. In the case of a blank cell being revealed, then the neighbors are recursively shown. Here is reveal neighbors, another call method, which is our compose method. And it's made of some other smaller methods that are going to either reveal or unhighlight some neighbors, or it's going to end in victory if all cells are safe, then return itself. Our next service object is cell recursive reveal, and that's a service object for revealing a cell and then recursively revealing the surrounding neighboring cells. And I think I went back one too many. 1 second. Here it is. Okay. And this is what kind of makes that popping effect we saw earlier on that GIF, where you click one cell and then you have this gigantic pop, and it hits a bunch of more cells. This is what makes that happen, and that's referenced as the pop effect. Cell optimization. So what does cell look like now? Well, cell brings it together and it handles cell task. As you can see, cell can toggle a flag. It can reveal if a cell is, if it's not already revealed. It can highlight neighboring cells that are eligible for highlighting. And check if the count or flag. It can check the count of the neighboring flags of the neighboring cells and see if they're flagged. Excuse me. And yeah, it's only doing things that cells should be doing. And if we wouldn't have made those service objects, cell would have all of those other call methods in this model, and it would be just flooded because those call methods have multiple helper methods, and sometimes those helper methods have a couple of helper methods, and next thing you know, your model's hundreds of lines long and the testing is getting crazy. And doing it this way really helps with debugging as well. It's easier to find out where your app's going wrong when it's split up. And yeah. So we mentioned board a lot. Let's get into board. So we wanted to quickly get a visual of the biggest aspect of Minesweeper, which is the battlefield or the board. And this started by creating a generate method within the board model, which is an array within an array for each row, and then outputting that to the terminal. Here we have generate, we have array and dot new rows, and it's going to iterate over that y coordinate and make a row, and then vice versa with x, and it's going to build that out, and we get some good output here. And this is this terminal view, because we just wanted to be able to see something. When I went to my boot camp for backend, which is Rails mainly, or just mainly working on the backend. I guess Ruby on Rails is both front end and backend, but I worked on the backend in Rails. And the thing is, when you work backend, you really don't get a lot of visuals. So when you can get a visual, it's really exciting. And I was really excited to see this output. Went a little quickly. So with the output, the numbers are representing a coordinate, and the bomb emoji represents a mine, and that blank white square is an unrevealed cell. And if you could kind of visualize it, that's like the board. If you could like put those into like a grid. So what is board? Well, now that we have our first look at board, let's answer some questions. What is board? Well, now board is an array that is a collection of cells, coordinates, and of course mines. It is a set of cells, and a board is really just a bunch of cell objects. What exactly does board do, and how does it work? Well, board can insert cells, it can place mines, and it can store game data for reference. So what does board look like now? Well, board is now a model that has many service objects like cell that handle each of its various duties. And like previous mentioned, this really keeps the model following SRP. It keeps the board model doing board model things, and that's dealing with cells. So let's go over the service objects for board. Well, we have board generate now, and that's a service object that generates all cells within the board. At first, we did that using active record to build all the cells, which was fine, but it was a bit slow. So we switched to a bulk insert, which is what we're seeing in the image below. And there it is, def call cell insert all. And that really just makes the app run a lot faster because you're able to insert multiple rows into the cell table in a single query method. And the cell data and build for method is how we build arrays of cells. So, yeah. So the next one is board object or board randomly placed mines. And this is a service object that handles placing mines in cells randomly. We can see this below. It goes through some validations to validate if to ensure that a board is saved before it does place the mines, or it prevents mines from being placed multiple times on the same board. After that, it updates them and it saves the mines placements. So our next service object is board settings. It's a service object that handles storing the type, width, height, and number of mines in a grid, in the grid of a board cells. Push, go. Yeah. And basically, it's able to set the presets for us. It's able to decide. It helps us have those different levels of difficulty. We have beginner, intermediate, and expert. And that's all board settings. It's doing it for us. So now back to our board model. Why does it all matter? Well, like I said before, it allows us to keep board doing board things, and that's really important. So board currently is right here, pictured below. As you can see.
Hey, may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just one apology. I realized after you started your presentation that we did your audio record. I'm not going to ask you to redo the whole thing, but probably the very first slide.
Mm-hmm.
Silent, so we'll deal with that. So probably introduce yourself later. But
okay.
Looking at this, I had a technical question, which is I noticed that you have board as a namespace. You also have an active record model board. That not in conflict with each other with how Rails does model creation.
Are you referring to the
board settings is a object called settings in the namespace of board.
Yeah,
active record models also board.
Yeah, that would conflict with it, but we have, I think it's like an include service objects class of some kind that we include in board methods, so that might fix that problem as well. I just didn't include it with the presentation because I just wanted to put the main methods in there. But yeah, there's like an include. I'm not sure, Paul.
Nick's probably right. I am just old, and I get confused about old behaviors.
Oh, okay.
So, Nick was pointing out that Zeitwerk, which is underlying loader, behaves differently than before. Thanks, Nick.
Oh, nice. Okay. I did not know that. Thanks for that info. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. But
Okay.
just for the purposes of the video, in case you're joining, the presentation is on Minesweeper Alliance, which Gabe has implemented along with his friend Paul. And I apologize ahead of time for the audio cutting out for the first couple minutes of the presentation. Gabe, really appreciate you presenting. I'll let you get back to.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that. I'll do a little intro at the end again. But this is Board, and Board is able to do Board things now and not concern itself with a bunch of logic at one time. And you can see in the generate cells method, we're able to reference our service object generate and our service object place mines, and really just keeps it readable, keeps it easier to maintain and to let other people jump in and be able to understand what's going on. So if you're still with me, let's see the actual application. I have it pulled up on my browser right here. Can you also see my screen? Oh, I think so. I think it's the Void of Doom right there.
Yep, we can see the infinity mirror.
Yes. All right. Yeah, let's check the app out. So this is Minesweeper Alliance, like the slides I have shown before, and we're going to start with a beginner game. So here we have our grid, and there's some rules, just basic rules to how to play Minesweeper. I'm going to place a cell now, and you can see that there's 3 people playing right now. Yes, so I'm going to place another cell, and this is what that ×3 means. It stands for how many people are on the same page as you right now. Okay, so we just hit a big pop effect, and that really helps get the majority of the board done. Let's see if we could win the game for the presentation. Okay.
I think some outside members have joined us on our public site.
Awesome.
So that's cool.
Yeah, if you do want to join, it's minesweeperalliance.net. Here, I'll send this in the chat. Maybe get more people in here. We've never played it with so many people, so it is interesting. My camera's in the way of my screen, so I can't see what you're clicking. It is interesting to see how it's going to react with so many people. Nice. And to place a flag, you right-click. If anyone was wondering, I think you can remove them with the same click. Oh no, yeah. Nice. All right, the mines won again. If you want to see the expert grade, it's pretty crazy. 30. It's 30 by 16, so there's 99 bombs hidden. Yeah. That one's pretty hard. There's also a random one, and it's gonna choose between beginner, and intermediate or expert if you really can't decide what you want to play. And I was hoping this might be it. No, it's not it. Well, there's some Easter egg patterns as well that aren't typical Minesweeper patterns. So if you do jump on, you might be able to see one of those. But let's get back to the presentation. Am I still presenting? Yeah. Okay. So that was a quick overview of the game. But we didn't forget about our model game. So how does game work? Well, first, game builds a new game using its build for method. And secondly, it builds an associated board instance or object and stores the board settings instance into the board settings as a serialized hash. Third, it will generate an associated one-dimensional array of cells according to the desired board settings and filling in cell coordinates for each cell based on its array index using the board generate build coordinates for method. Take a quick peek at that. And fourth, it will then save all the steps to the database and also set the lifecycle of the current game status to standing by. And this will change once the first cell is revealed. And a quick thing to add is it's impossible, and like the reason for this is because it's impossible to hit a mine your first click. We didn't want it for you to be able to click your first time on and lose just right off the bat, because that's no fun. But yeah. So a little more on the process of the game. When a game starts, a user selects a game type, difficulty, beginner, intermediate, or expert. The game model create for method is triggered, which calls the build for method, and boom, we get a new game and a board. The board generates its grid of cells, and when it ends, the game will end when the user or users wins or loses, and the status of the game is updated. And either the end of victory or the end of defeat method is triggered based on the outcome of the game. And the game will do some stat stuff, and the statistics method is triggered to calculate and update some game stats and stores that away. And here we have a quick compressive overview of game in all its glory. Game is just basically there to put everything together and get it all working. So a little more on the architecture of Minesweeper Alliance. A big portion when making the app initially was trying our best to incorporate object-oriented design into it as much as we could, some OOD. And we attempted to incorporate the principles of encapsulation and OOD, and we hope we did it correctly. It's very much like a guideline, and you try to follow it the best you can, and you hope you do it right. But the models in Minesweeper Alliance are designed to encapsulate their behaviors and their state, and the game is responsible for managing the status of the game, including starting, ending, and stats. And the board model encapsulates the cell logic, and the cells are there to manage its own state and its own interactions. Also, a big portion when making our application was having objects that send messages to each other and talk to each other. And the objects communicate by sending messages for each other. For example, the game model sends messages to board model to place mines, while the board model sends messages to cell models to reveal cells or flag them. And this way, our models stay concerned with what they should be doing and don't do more than they need to be doing. And also big aspect when designing the application was incorporating our single responsibility principle as much as we could. And basically that is the separation of roles. So each model in Minesweeper Alliance has a clear and defined responsibility. And so game manages the overall game flow, status change, and game overall. And board manages the collection of cells, including making and resetting of cells and placing mines. And cell represents a single cell in the grid and handles its individual state, which either can be revealed, flagged, mined, or neighboring. But a little more on Hotwire and Turbo, because that's what makes the multiplayer possible, and that's what we had just seen. And it's really cool to see it happen. That's Turbo. Turbo allows for real-time updates to certain parts of the UI. For example, when a user reveals a cell or flags it, the server will broadcast a Turbo stream response to update the board for all the players. Turbo Frame allows for partial updates. For example, when a cell is modified, only the board is updated and refreshed to players, and this allows for that multiplayer feel. And we have action cable to link for the broadcast to all the players. And you might have noticed, if you go to your little up corner, if you're on the app still, you could hit that in the right corner right there. There is, I think it's MMS, and there's like a number. That's your stats. And you're able to track your stats across the browser, even when you exit out and reboot the application. And you could do that without making any kind of login. So that's because the app tracks our users using a user token stored in the browser's cookies. So when a user first visits Minesweeper Alliance, a new user is created with a unique ID, and this ID is saved in a permanent cookie. So that way, in future visits, the app will look up the users via this token, and that ensures that the stats and data are persistent without requiring any kind of login method. And the reason we did that was just to try to improve the user experiences, so users don't need to create accounts or log in, because who really wants to do that? You have to make logins for everything nowadays. And yeah, that just keeps our user stats and activity preserved across sessions with that browser. And that is the end of my presentation. I wanted to give some credits to Andy Kroll. I mentioned him earlier, first Ruby friend. If you're in a position to mentor somebody and you're wanting to, I recommend looking there. Or if you're looking for a mentor, you can look there as well. And that's first Ruby friend is purely just Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So you'll have an awesome intro to the community. A big shout out to Radon Skorik, whose app this is mainly inspired over. It's heavily inspired by his application, Minds versus Humanity. It was awesome to kind of recreate it and reference his application too when we got stuck, to see how he did things. And he's an awesome guy. So you should check out his blog. He writes a lot of cool blog posts. And shout out to Paul Dobbin-Schmaltz, who is my mentor and a super cool guy. I gained a lot from this project. It was fun just to see how to make the game Minesweeper, because I love the game. I remember when I was younger, I would go onto my parents' PC and they would do that boot up thing, and I would play Minesweeper, but I really never knew how to play, and I still hardly know how to play. Paul had to teach me how to play, actually. I got a lot out of this application. And
I've had access to Minesweeper since Windows 3.0,
Yeah.
and legitimately in the 90s, and I still don't. And I'm not much better with solitaire either, but hey, I still will keep trying.
Exactly. Yeah, it's those things where you just do it. Just because it's there. Yeah. But yeah, so I gained a lot from this application, seeing how games could be built. And also it was a really awesome experience to shadow someone who is so much more experienced than I am and see how they do things, see how they think, and see how a senior engineer makes an application. Because I'm very much still a junior. So that's really like the main value that I got out of it. And yeah, I'm open to any questions. I have one for everybody as well. I would like to hear some different opinions on service objects, if they're unavoidable, if they're awesome and helpful, or if they break the principles of object-oriented programming. I've read a lot of mixed comments online, so I'm interested to see what everyone thinks of them.
Oh, dude, there's 1,000 comments online. Service objects, in my humble opinionated opinion, service objects are fantastic for what they're good for. The way I like to think about it is a service object is a verb. It acts upon other things, and sometimes it makes a lot of sense to put logic in those sorts of objects rather than in a noun object like models that represents a thing. There's a lot of real life programming. There's a lot of processes that don't get into model of things just responding to each other, and so we end up putting logic places. Another thing that this really comes up, let's say are asked to make, thinking of like a calculation, but let's say that you're told that here's a business process, that you make a calculator that does a business process. Maybe it's like payouts, like winners in Minesweeper tournaments, okay? And so then someone decides, but some tournaments are going to have different rules. Like, there's a special Minesweeper tournament, and they're going to have different payout rules everyday Minesweeper. And so now you have two sets of rules. It is really cool to be able to make a subclass of the service object that is the calculator, leave all your models alone, and just specify what is the calculator responsible. As a somewhat contrived example, but I hope that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it could be easy just to mix their responsibilities, and I guess you break some principles in the process.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a leg up because I know the school that you went to because I went through it too. Did you do test-driven development, or did you go a different path with it?
Yes, we used a little TDD. We also used there was a lot of that was the cool thing. One of the things I appreciated from Paul as well is I was taught with TDD as well, where like, okay, you start your app through test, and that kind of I guess serves as like a trail and a path to the actual method being completed. But I guess when you get to a certain level, you just know how to do things, and that's kind of what Paul knows how to do as well. And he does make his test like that, and that's how it got started. But for this project, we used a lot of I guess UI testing. We would make the app, see how it was running, and tweak it from there. And then we would go back and maybe beef up our tests a little more. But yeah, there was some TDD, but it wasn't purely like 100% TDD.
Yeah, since my name was brought up, I feel I should step in and say I think TDD is wrong when you don't know where you're going. And we certainly didn't know where we were going at first. And so we just wanted to make something that kind of worked. Like we had something established. Okay, let's go make a bunch of tests so that now we can change the code and be confident about our changes. So that's the way I do it. But
that's that's one of the things about, like, it's easy to write tests when you know exactly what your endpoint is, but when you're not 100% sure, it's a lot more fun to do. So did you find the process of like making some things and then coming back and shoring up your test suite change your view on it at all?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, Ken mentioned in chat, and I agree with this, spikes are technology that experiment, try it out, figure out what. I certainly do that a lot. even with the legacy code, the things that get assigned to me out and left field, figure out what's. I find myself finding at a breakpoint, actively acting a whole object model and just figuring out what. Where I know what it is that solve this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
But yeah,
and
but I
also,
wouldn't want to add, like, I wouldn't say, here's the code, like, except in maybe the most extreme of hotfix situations or between. I wouldn't want to say, here's a bunch of code changes, no tests, to demonstrate facially that they do anything correctly.
Yeah. We definitely went back. And if we try to test it as much as much as we could. And that was a lot of fun too because during my boot camp we were mainly use Pry to test, and I got to see some new methods of testing with debug and inspect, and a totally different kind of view on how to break into the application. So that was like a lot of fun.
What did you find was the most challenging part of this project?
Yeah, most challenging part. The most challenging part, honestly, was probably getting it deployed. That could be like a whole thing by itself, like a whole new presentation. Honestly, Paul and I went through that for I don't know, like a couple of weeks, for a few hours at a time, maybe like 10, 15 hours a week, just trying to get it deployed. It's deployed for free right now. It's not on any hosting website. We're able to use a virtual server on a computer, connect that to Kamal, connect that to Docker, and use some tunnels with Cloudflare to deploy it for free. So that was probably the most interesting and challenging part that I could see. I would love to get that going myself, but for that to work, you have to have a server running at all times.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gabe, I have a question. Did you use any of these new features that are available in Rails 8, like the solid cache or anything like that?
1 second, my headphones are kind of bugging out.
Sure.
Yeah, so to answer your question, when we made, or like Paul and I started making this application, like, I don't even know, could be like, what do you think, Paul, like half a year ago? Yeah, we started making this application around like August, I think, so it's been quite a while, and Rails 8 wasn't out yet. So this app is made with Rails 8, but because we updated it after it had came out just to have it on there. But no, I don't think, we didn't take advantage of any of the new features yet. That could definitely be in the future for some future optimization and refactoring.
Yeah, that's okay. Just curious to know.
Yeah, thank you.
Would there be any feature that you were specifically like, if I were to take a next step, this is what the next feature I would implement? Is there one that sticks out to you?
Yeah, another one. We wanted to better. We wanted to do some updating on the user stats. We were just talking about it earlier today that if you score a high score on a game, then you should be like notified that you got a high score on the game. It should maybe highlight green. You should be able to see it in your stats. You should see that you scored a high score, just to get some more satisfaction out of it. I think that would be one of our next steps for sure if we were to keep working on it. Aside from that, no, yeah. There's a lot to do on it probably, but I just can't think of any on top of my head. But that's one that comes to mind.
One thing I'll add there is, so every time we do a move, it figures out the result of the move. It generates all the HTML for the board, like the whole board, and it sends that over the wire to every other player as a broadcast. And then all the other browsers pick that up and just morph the board into that new version. So I think as an optimization, I want to get even like more hardcore about that and just only send over the cells that have changed. So like somehow kind of like just, update just this one cell, or if it's a big pop, I guess it would be like a list of cells or something. Because I think otherwise I've seen a few times where it feels like I've tried to do a click, but it just didn't register. And I feel like maybe it's a race condition between like the cell is currently reloading and the JavaScript isn't sitting there yet or something. So that's one of the maybe challenges of a hotwire game in a browser where the board is changing state behind you and it's having to quickly rebuild it. But I think there's some race conditions in there.
Yeah, I was going to ask that kind of question, like what happens when everybody is like clicking on the same cell?
I think if that happens, it actually just happened to us earlier. I think it just kind of kicks you out the game, and it's going to give you a little flash notification. Yeah, that's something to also think about.
Handle that pretty well.
Yeah.
If you check the state from the database.
Yeah,
I think I saw something on the screen, like, when I clicked on a cell to place a flag, and then I think something happened, the flag disappeared, and then it came back again. I think it probably was, some problem with multiple users clicking it or something like that.
Very possible, yeah. You're also able to remove flags. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul.
Yeah, I've seen it where like two people are trying to place a flag in the same square at the same time, and it's just like it appears and goes away. So,
yeah, this may not be the right place to ask this. Do either of you know if hot wire under the hood sockets? I honestly,
it's WebSockets. It goes over action cable.
I feel like event stream. I think it's fairly clever. Now on the game, you time is that one?
No, just one game in general. If someone chooses a different size, then it's going to be that game. So there's only one game going on in any time. Yeah, so we're all sharing the same game. That's why it's a Minesweeper Alliance. We're all on the same team.
If we're 9x9 and something.
No, if someone has started a game and you're on the screen still to start a game, it'll just not do your thing, and instead it will go to the game that's playing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But typically, if you're on that new game page in the war room, you won't have the chance to click a game. You'll just be brought into the game when it starts.
Game having pedigree back to the kind of game.
I don't know. Let me see if I could look that up really quickly. It's a good question.
It was single player, so it was. I don't.
Oh, I thought you meant there was a multi-Minesweeper.
Oh no. No, yeah. But I think there is. There's so many different versions of Minesweeper now. I'm not sure if they're all like official, but you could find like a lot of multiplayer Minesweeper games online. It's kind of crazy. It's like an app people like to make. It's funny. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. Very nice. Oh.
Sweet.
Hey, I'm also curious about this boot camp that you were talking about, right? Which school was that? I think Ren and...
Yeah, Ren and I both went to Turing. Right here, I got the shirt on. Wanted to represent them. Turing School of Software and Design.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a boot camp. I think they're just about to kick off their February cohort. It's a great boot camp. I think they're always looking for instructors and always want some more graduates or more students to come in. So
cool.
Yeah.
The nice thing about Turing is that they teach the backend program teaches Rails, the front end program teaches JavaScript, and they really go through the mechanics of why something works the way it does, instead of just saying, here's 17 frameworks in 47 weeks, and now you know all of the languages. It really deep dives into one and says, like, here's why this piece works the way it does. And so it translates very beautifully over to other languages.
Definitely. Yeah. It's also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It's also a boot camp that takes 7 months to graduate from. And a lot of boot camps tell you that, like, oh, you could graduate in 6 weeks, a couple months in. But this one takes well over a year, or well over half a year, and almost coming up on a year. So it's a lot different than most.
Yeah.
I've never cried that much in my life.
My gosh, I've never been so stressed. Yeah.
Oh.
It's like drinking from a fire hose for 7 straight months. I called my mother. I'm 30 something, and I called my mother, and I was like, "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so tired, and I don't know what to eat. Just tell me what I'm eating today, please." After the first week, I was like, "Please just tell me what to eat."
Is it very intense boot camp? Or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll put in about anywhere between 60 to 80 hours a week.
Oh.
Yeah, it's full time, as much as it could get.
Mm-hmm.
Getting some rest when you can get it. Yeah.
Gabe, if you want to hear something absolutely crazy, I was working a full-time job and single momming 3 kids at the time.
That is wild. They actually recommend you don't do that.
Yeah, I see why. I drank way too much caffeine.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome that you could do it.
I survived.
Shows your strength. Yes.
Yeah, no, it was great because, like, at first everyone's like, ooh, we don't want the moms in the group. And then all of a sudden everyone realized that the moms are the ones who are like, come hell or high water, we're getting this done. And it's like.
Yeah, definitely.
Question is, was the vibrating, is that the extra coffee or is that general anxiety? No, I'm sure you did awesome.
Oh, it was probably just the existential panic because
Yes.
Me.
Yes.
No, but it was really worth it. It was quite wonderful.
Yeah. Actually, I'm the third person in my family to go through it. So, yeah.
Really?
I have a sister, and then her husband as well went through it.
All back end, front end, back end, what?
All back end, all Ruby. So, yeah.
There were a couple of people in my cohort that had gone through the front end program and then looped back again to go through the back end program so they could get full stack jobs. And I was like, you want to do this a second time?
Wow. At that price, you could maybe just go to college. You could just go for it.
Yeah.
And Gabe, by the way, seriously, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate it. Maybe it's going to be the first of many. Maybe I'll get another one going soon.